Good afternoon. Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Charlotte, and it's quarantine story time again. And we're back with more War and Peace. So, we'll pick up where we left off. Yesterday, Prince Andrei has gone to the Austrian court to deliver news of one victory, one military victory, but it's kind of been overrun by the news of how Vienna has been taken over by Bonaparte, and there's talk of a secret peace behind the Russians' back, and so all his excitement about being part of this battle got a little overwhelmed by all that. So I think we'll probably be picking right back up again with him. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're returning, welcome as well. You can always check out previous episodes on the War and Peace playlist that I have started on my channel. So feel free to subscribe or and check out that playlist to catch up on anything you may have missed. I have the live chat going, so let me just see. Make sure that is up and going. So yeah, that is up. So feel free to drop any questions or comments there. And thanks to everyone who's been watching and been posting comments on the different channels. It's really encouraging, so thanks a lot. And we won't spend too much time. Let's just jump right into this today. We're picking up in, so we're in volume 1, part 2 still, but we're now in section 11. I think we're going to get through 11 through 14 today because they seem like they're quicker sections. So let's go. The next day, he woke up late. Going over his recent impressions, he remembered first of all that he had to present himself to the Emperor Franz that day, remembered the Minister of War, the courteous Austrian Imperial Adjutant, Bilibin, and the conversation yesterday evening. Putting on his full dress uniform, which he had not worn in a long time, for his trip to the palace, fresh, animated, and handsome, with his arm in a sling, he went into Bilibin's study. In the study there were 4 gentlemen from the diplomatic corps. Volokhonsky was acquainted with Prince Ippolit Kurgan, who was a secretary at the embassy. Bilibin introduced him to the others. The gentlemen who frequented Bilibin, young, rich, and merry society people, constituted here, as in Vienna, a separate circle, which Bilibin, who was the head of it, called ours, les nôtres. This circle, made up almost exclusively of diplomats, clearly had its own high society interests, which had nothing in common with war and politics, interest in relations with certain women, and in the administrative side of their service. These gentlemen received Prince Andrei into their circle with apparent eagerness as theirs, an honor they accorded to a few. Out of courtesy and as a subject for getting into conversation, he asked several questions about the army and the battle. He was asked several questions about the army and the battle, and the conversation again broke up into inconsequentially merry jokes and gossip. But it was especially nice, one said, telling about a fellow diplomat's failure, it was especially nice that the Chancellor told him straight out that his appointment to London was a promotion and that he should look at it as such. Can you picture his face when he heard that? But what's worst of all, gentlemen, I'm betraying Kurgan to you, is that the man is in misfortune, and this Don Juan, this terrible fellow, is taking advantage of it. Prince Ippolit was lying in a Voltaire armchair, his legs thrown over the armrest. He laughed. Parlez-moi de ça, he said. Oh, you Don Juan, oh, you serpent, said various voices. You don't know, Bolkonsky, Bilibin turned to Prince Andrei, that all the horrors of the French army, I almost said the Russian army, are nothing compared to what this man has been doing among the women. Les femmes la campagne de l'homme, uttered Prince Ippolit, and he began examining his raised feet through his lorgnette. Bilibin and ours burst out laughing, looking Ippolit in the eye. Prince Andrei saw that this Ippolit, of whom he, it had to be admitted, had almost been jealous over his wife, was the buffoon of the company. No, I must treat you to Kurgan, Bilibin said softly to Bolkonsky. He's charming when he argues about politics. You should see such gravity. He sat beside Hippolyte, and gathering the folds of his forehead, began a conversation about politics with him. Prince Andrei and the others stood around them. Le cabinet de Berlin ne peut pas exprimer un sentiment d'élégance, Hippolyte began, looking around significantly at them all, sans exprimer, comme dans ce dernier note. Vous comprenez. Et puis, si Sa Majesté l'Empereur ne déroge pas un principe de notre alliance. Attendez, je n'ai pas fini, he said to Prince Andrei, seizing him by the arm. Je suppose que l'intervention sera plus forte que la non-intervention. Et, he paused, on ne pourra pas imputer à la fin de non-recevoir notre dépêche du 28 novembre. Voilà comment tout cela finira. He let go of Bolkonsky's arm, thus indicating that he was quite finished. Demosthenes, je te reconnais à quelque tu escaches dans de bouche dehors, said Bilibin, whose shock of hair moved on his head with pleasure. They all laughed. Hippolyte laughed more than anyone else. He obviously suffered, choked, but was unable to hold back the wild laughter that distended his ever-immobile face. Well, I tell you what, gentlemen, said Bilibin, Bolkonsky is a guest in my house, and here in Brünn, and I want to treat him, as far as I can, to all the joys of life here. If we were in Vienna, that would be easy, but here, dans ce vilain trou morave, it's harder, and I tell you all to help. Il fait lui faire les honneurs de Brünn. You'll take the theatre upon yourselves. I'll take society, and you, Hippolyte, naturally the women. We must show him Amélie. Charming, said one of ours, kissing the tips of his fingers. Generally, this bloodthirsty soldier, said Bilibin, needs to be converted to more humane views. It's unlikely that I'll take advantage of your hospitality, gentlemen, and it's now time for me to go, Bolkonsky said, glancing at his watch. Where? To the Emperor. Oh! Well, goodbye, Bolkonsky. Goodbye, Prince. Come early to dinner, said several voices. We'll take good care of you. Try to praise the order for the delivery of provisions and the itineraries as much as possible to the Emperor, said Bilibin, seeing Bolkonsky off to the front hall. I wish I could, but I can't, as far as I know, Bolkonsky replied, smiling. Well, generally, talk as much as possible. Audiences are his passion, but he likes, nor is he able to talk himself, as you'll see. Section 12. At the levee, the Emperor Franz merely looked intently into the face of Prince Andrei, who was standing in the place assigned to him among the Austrian officers, and nodded his long head at him. But before the levee, yesterday's imperial adjutant courteously conveyed to Bolkonsky the Emperor's wish to grant him an audience. The Emperor Franz received him standing in the middle of the room. Before the conversation began, it struck Prince Andrei that the Emperor was as if confused, did not know what to say, and blushed. Tell me, when did the battle begin? He asked hastily. Prince Andrei replied. After that question, other equally simple questions followed. Was Kutuzov in good health? How long ago had he left Krems? And so on. The Emperor spoke with such an expression as if his whole goal consisted in asking a certain number of questions. The replies to these questions, as was only too clear, were of no interest to him. At what time did the battle begin? Asked the Emperor. I am unable to tell your Majesty at what time the battle at the front began, but in Dürnstein, where I was, the troops went into attack between 5 and 6 o'clock in the evening, Bolkonsky said, livening up and supposing on this occasion that he would be able to present the truthful description already prepared in his head of all he knew and had seen. But the Emperor smiled and interrupted him. How many miles? From where to where, your Majesty? From Dürnstein to Krems. 3.5 miles, your Majesty. Have the French abandoned the left bank? According to the scouts' reports, the last of them crossed at night on rafts. Is there enough forage in Krems? Forage was not delivered in the quantities. The Emperor interrupted him. At what time was General Schmidt killed? At 7 o'clock, I believe. At 7 o'clock? Very sad, the Emperor said. That he thanked him and inclined his head. Prince Andrei went out and was at once surrounded on all sides by courtiers. On all sides, affectionate eyes looked at him, and affectionate words came to him. Yesterday's imperial adjutant reproached him for not staying in the palace, and offered him his own house. The Minister of War came up to congratulate him on the Order of Maria Theresa of the third degree, which the Emperor was to bestow on him. The Empress Chamberlain invited him to Her Majesty. The Archduchess also wanted to see him. He did not know whom to answer and needed a few seconds to collect his wits. The Russian ambassador took him by the shoulders, led him to the window, and started talking to him. Contrary to what Bilibin had said, the news he brought was received joyfully. A Thanksgiving prayer service was ordered. Kutuzov was awarded a Mary Teresa Cross, and the whole army received rewards. Volokhonsky received invitations from all sides and had to spend the whole morning paying visits to the high dignitaries of Austria. Having spent his visits past 4 in the afternoon, mentally composing a letter to his father, having finished his visits past 4 in the afternoon, mentally composing a letter to his father about the battle and his journey to Brunn, Prince Andrei was returning home to Bilibin's. Before going to Bilibin's, Prince Andrei had gone to a bookstore to stock up on books for the campaign and had spent a long time there. By the porch of the house occupied by Bilibin stood a britska half filled with things, and Franz, Bilibin's servant, dragged a trunk with difficulty, came out of the door. "What's this?" asked Volokhonsky. "Ach, lacht," said Franz, loading the trunk into the britska with difficulty. "Wir sehen noch weiter. Der Boschwitz ist schon wieder hinter uns her." Which is, Your Excellency, we're moving on further on. The villain is just behind us. "What is it? What?" Prince Andrei kept asking. Bilibin came out to greet Volokhonsky. The usually calm face of Bilibin was troubled. "Non, avoue que est charmant," he was saying. "C'est l'histoire du pont de Tabor," a bridge in Vienna. "Ils sont passés sans couper faire." No, admit that it's charming, the story of the bridge of Tabor. They crossed it without opposition. Prince Andrei understood nothing. "But where are you coming from that you don't know what every coachman in town already knows?" "I'm coming from the Archduchess. I didn't hear anything there." "And you didn't see people packing up everywhere?" "No, I didn't. But what's it all about?" Prince Andrei asked impatiently. "What's it all about? It's about the French having crossed the bridge defended by Auersperg, and the bridge wasn't blown up. So Murat is now racing down the road to Brunn, and they'll be here today or tomorrow." "What do you mean here? How is it they didn't blow up the bridge, since it's mined?" "That's what I'm asking. Nobody knows, not even Bonaparte himself." Volokhonsky shrugged his shoulders. "But if the bridge has been crossed, that means the army is lost. It will be cut off." "That's just the thing," answered Bilibin. "Listen. The French enter Vienna. As I said, everything's fine. The next day, that is yesterday, the gentlemen marshals, Murat, Lannes, and Belliard, got on their horses and set out for the bridge. Note that all 3 are Gascons. "Gentlemen," says one, "you know that the bridge of the Faber has been mined and countermined, and that in front of it is a terrible tête de pont and 15,000 troops, who have been ordered to blow up the bridge and not let us onto it. But it will be pleasing to our sovereign Emperor Napoleon if we take this bridge. Let's go, the 3 of us, and take the bridge." "Let's go," say the others, and they go and take the bridge, cross it, and are now on this side of the Danube with their whole army, coming against us, against you and your communications. "Enough joking," Prince Andrei said, sadly and seriously. This news was grievous and at the same time pleasant for Prince Andrei. As soon as he learned that the Russian army was in such a hopeless situation, it occurred to him that it was precisely he who was destined to lead the Russian army out of that situation, that here was that talon which would take him out of the ranks of unknown officers and open for him the first path to glory. Listening to Bilibin, he was already considering how, on coming to the army, he would submit an opinion at the military council, which alone would save the army, and how he alone would be charged with carrying out this plan. "Enough joking," he said. "I'm not joking," Bilibin went on, "and nothing is more true or sad. These gentlemen come to the bridge by themselves and wave white handkerchiefs. Assure them all that a truce has been called and that they, the marshals, are coming to negotiate with Prince Auersperg. The officer on duty lets them into the tête de pont. They tell 1,000 Gascon absurdities, that the war is over, that the Emperor Franz has a fixed meeting with Bonaparte, that they wish to see Prince Auersperg, and so on. The officers send for Augsburg. These gentlemen embrace the officers, joke, sit on the cannons, and meanwhile, a French battalion gets onto the bridge unnoticed, throws the sack of flammable material into the water, and approaches the tête de pont. Finally, the lieutenant general himself comes, our dear Prince Auersperg von Mautern, our dear enemy, flower of the Austrian military, hero of the Turkish wars. The hostilities are over. We can shake hands with each other. The Emperor Napoleon is burning with desire to meet Prince Auersperg. In short, these men aren't Gascons for nothing, so they shower Auersperg with beautiful words. So he's so charmed by his quickly established intimacy with the French marshals, so dazzled by the sight of Murat's mantle and ostrich feathers, qu'il ne voit que du feu et oublie celui qu'il devait faire sur l'ennemi. Despite the animation of his speech, Bilibin did not forget to pause after this mot, not to allow time for it to be appreciated. The French battalion rushes into the tête de pont, strikes the cannons, and the bridge is taken. No, but the best thing of all, he went on, his excitement about his own charming story subsiding, is that the sergeant in charge of the cannon that was to give the signal to ignite the mines and blow up the bridge, this sergeant, seeing that French troops were running over the bridge, was about to fire, but Lannes pushed his hand away. The sergeant, who was clearly smarter than his general, goes up to Auersperg and says, Prince, you are deceived. The French are here. Murat sees that the game is up, if the sergeant is allowed to speak. With feigned astonishment, a real Gascon, he turns to Auersperg. Where is that Austrian discipline the world praises so much, he says, if you allow the lower ranks to speak to you like that? C'est génial. Le prince Auersperg se pique le bon de honneur et fait mettre le sergent en arrêt. Non, mais avouez que les charmants toutes ces histoires du pont de Tego. Ce n'est ni bêtise ni lâchette. C'est très peut-être, said Prince Andrei, vividly imagining gray greatcoats, wounds, gunsmoke, the sounds of shooting, and the glory that awaited him. Non plus. C'est le corps danse de trop mauvais draps, Bilibin went on. Ce n'est ni pression, ni lâche, ni baptiste. C'est comme à ulm. It was as if he fell to pondering, searching for a phrase. C'est du mac. Nous sommes maqués, he concluded, feeling that he had uttered a mot, and that a fresh mot, a mot that would be repeated. The folds of his forehead, gathered till then, suddenly quickly released themselves at a sign of satisfaction, and smiling slightly, he began to examine his nails. Where are you going? He said suddenly, turning to Prince Andrei, who got up and made for his room. I'm leaving. For where? The army. Why don't you want to stay another 2 days? But now I'm leaving at once. And Prince Andrei, having given orders for his departure, left for his room. You know what, my dear? Bilibin said, coming into his room. I've been thinking about you. Why should you go? In proof of the irrefutability of his argument, all the folds fled his face. Prince Andrei looked at his interlocutor questioningly and said nothing. Why should you go? I know you think it's your duty to gallop off to the army now that the army is in danger. I understand that, mon cher. C'est de la heroism. Not in the least, said Prince Andrei. But you are une philosophie. So be one fully. Look at things from another angle, and you'll see that your duty is, on the contrary, to protect yourself. Let others, who are good for nothing else, do that. You weren't told to come back, and you haven't been dismissed from here. Therefore, you can stay and come with us, wherever our sorry fate takes us. They say they're going to Olmütz. Now, Olmütz is a very nice town, and you and I can calmly drive there together in my carriage. Stop joking, Bilibin, said Volokhonsky. I'm saying it to you sincerely as a friend. Consider, where will you go now, and what for, and when you can stay here? One of two things awaits you. He gathered the skin over his left temple. Either peace will be concluded before you reach the army, or it will be defeat and disgrace along with the whole of Kutuzov's army. And Bilibin released the skin, feeling that his dilemma was irrefutable. I cannot consider that, Prince Andrei said coldly, and thought, I'm going in order to save the army. Mon cher, vous êtes un héros, said Bilibin. Section 13. Question, is this the Patriotic War of 1812? I don't think so. I'll have to look that up to see exactly which war this was. I mean, there was lots of Napoleon, wars with Napoleon. I think they were earlier. I think it was earlier because the Napoleonic Wars started in 1803. I think this book was originally set around 1805, if I'm not mistaken, which I could be. I can double check that, but I think it's relatively early in Bonaparte's career, where he has a bit of a reputation, but he's still he's gotten a bit of reputation, but he's still rising to power, I believe. But yeah, I can research that and address that in the next one about exactly when this was to take place. There also might be a note in the back. Doo-doo-doo. Yeah, I'll check on that. Let's carry on. So we have 13. That same night, having respectfully taken leave of the Minister of War, Volokhonsky rode off to the army, not knowing himself where he would find it and fearing to be intercepted by the French on his way to Krems. In Brunn, all the court population was packing, and the heavy baggage had already been sent to Olmutz. Near Etzeldorf, Prince Andrei came out on the road along which the Russian army was moving with great haste and in the greatest disorder. The road was so choked with wagons that it was impossible to drive in a carriage. Having taken a horse and a Cossack from the chief of the Cossacks, Prince Andrei, hungry and tired, got ahead of the baggage train, going in search of the commander-in-chief and his own wagon. The most sinister rumors about the army's situation had reached him on the way, and the sight of the feverishly running army confirmed those rumors. Cette armée russe qu'elle est hors de l'Angleterre a transporté des extrémités de l'univers, nous allons lui faire éprouver la même sorte, la sorte de l'armée de l'homme. We shall make this Russian army, which the gold of England has brought from the ends of the universe, experience the same fate, the fate of the army of Ulm. He recalled the words of Napoleon's order to his army before the start of the campaign, and these words aroused in him at once an astonishment at the genius of the hero, a feeling of offended pride and a hope of glory. And what if there's nothing left to do but die, he thought. Why not, if need be? I'll do no worse than others. Prince Andrei looked with scorn at these countless mixed-up detachments, wagons, caissons, artillery, and again wagons of all possible sorts, trying to get ahead of each other and choking with the muddy road 3 or 4 abreast. On all sides, behind and before, as far as hearing could reach, there was the noise of wheels, the rumbling of flatbeds, carts, and gun carriages, the thud of hooves, the crack of whips, the shouts of drivers, the cursing of soldiers, orderlies, and officers. On the roadsides, one constantly saw now dead horses, skinned or unskinned, now broken down wagons near which solitary soldiers sat waiting for something, now soldiers who separated from their detachments and went in groups to the neighboring villages, or came from the villages dragging chickens, sheep, hay, or sacks filled with something. On the ascent and descent of the crowds became thicker, and there was a ceaseless moan of cries. Soldiers, sunk in mud up to their knees, carried cannon and wagons with their hands. Whips lashed, hooves slipped, traces snapped, and chests strained with shouting. The officers in charge of the movements rode up and down along the trains. Their voices were faintly heard amidst the general hubbub, and one could see from their faces that they despaired of the possibility of stopping the disorder. Voilà les chers, orthodox armed forces, thought Volokhonsky, recalling Bilibin's words. He wishing to ask someone among these people where the commander-in-chief was, he rode up to the baggage train. Directly in front of him rode a strange one-horse vehicle, evidently constructed by soldiers using homegrown means, something between a cart, a cabriolet, and a carriage. The driver of the vehicle was a soldier, and in it, under a leather top and apron, sat a woman all wrapped in shawls. Prince Andrei rode up and was about to address the soldier with his question when his attention was attracted by the desperate cries of the woman sitting in the little kibitka. The officer in charge of the baggage train was beating the soldier who sat on the box of this little carriage for trying to get ahead of the others, and his lash struck the apron of the vehicle. The woman cried out piercingly. Seeing Prince Andrei, she thrust her head out from under the apron and, waving her thin arms freed from the rug-like shawl, cried, "Adjutant, Mr. Adjutant, for God's sake, protect us! What's it all about? I'm the wife of the doctor of the 7th Chasseurs. They won't let us pass. We wouldn't keep up. Lost our people." "I'll flatten you like a pancake. Turn back," the officer shouted angrily at the soldier. "Turn back with your trollop." "Mr. Adjutant, protect us. What is it?" cried the doctor's wife. "Kindly let the wagon pass. Don't you see it's a woman?" said Prince Andrei, riding up to the officer. The officer glanced at him, and without replying, turned back to the soldier. "I'll teach you to go ahead. Back!" "Let them pass, I tell you," Prince Andrei repeated, pressing his lips. "And who do you think you are?" the officer addressed him with drunken rage. "Who do you think you are? Are you," he especially emphasized the word you, "a superior officer or what? I'm the superior here, not you. And you, back," he repeated, "or I'll flatten you like a pancake." The officer obviously liked the expression. "He told that little adjutant off grandly," a voice came from behind. Prince Andrei could see that the officer was in a sort of drunken fit of senseless rage when people do not know what they are about. He could see that his intercession for the doctor's wife in the kibitka was replete with what he feared most in the world, with what is known as ridicule. But his instinct told him otherwise. Before the officer had time to finish the last sentence, Prince Andrei, his face disfigured with rage, rode up to him and raised his whip. "Kindly let them pass!" The officer waved his hand and hastily rode off. "It's all from them, these staff officers, all this disorder," he grumbled. "Do it your way." Prince Andrei, without raising his eyes, hastily rode away from the doctor's wife, who was calling him her savior, and recalling with disgust the minutest details of this humiliating scene, rode on towards the village where he had been told the commander-in-chief was. On entering the village, he got off his horse and went to the first house, intending to rest for at least a moment, eat something, and bring clarity to all these insulting, tormenting thoughts. "These are not troops, they're a mob of ruffians," he was thinking as he went to the window of the first house, when a familiar voice called his name. He turned around. Nowitzki's handsome face was looking out of a small window. Nowitzki, chewing something with his juicy mouth and waving his arms, called to him. "Volokhonsky! Volokhonsky! Are you deaf or what? Come quickly!" he shouted. Going into the house, Prince Andrei saw Nowitzki and another adjutant having something to eat. They hastily turned to Volokhonsky with the question whether he had any fresh news. On their familiar faces, Prince Andrei read the expression of alarm and anxiety. This expression was especially noticeable on the always laughing face of Nowitzki. "Where's the commander-in-chief?" asked Volokhonsky. "Here, in this house," the adjutant replied. "Well, so, is it true there's peace and capitulation?" asked Nowitzki. "I was going to ask you. I know nothing except that I had a hard time getting to you." "And what's going on with us, brother? Terrible, I confess, brother. We laughed at Mac, and yet it's going much worse for us," said Nowitzki. "But sit down, eat something." "Now, Prince, you'll find no wagons, nothing, and God knows where your Piotr is," said the other adjutant. "Where are the headquarters?" "We'll spend the night in Znaim." What I did was repack everything I need onto 2 horses," said Nowitzki, "and I have had excellent packs made for me. I could skip off over the Bohemian mountains now." "It's bad, brother, but you're surely unwell, the way you're shivering?" asked Nowitzki, noticing how Prince Andrei twitched as if he had touched a Leyden jar. "It's nothing," replied Prince Andrei. He had just recalled his encounter with the doctor's wife and the convoy officer. "What is the commander-in-chief doing here?" he asked. "I understand nothing," said Nowitzki. "I understand one thing, and it's all vile, vile, vile," said Prince Andrei, and he went to the house where the commander-in-chief was staying. Going past Kutuzov's carriage, the winded riding horses of the suite, and the Cossacks talking loudly among themselves, Prince Andrei came to the entryway. Kutuzov himself, as Prince Andrei was told, was inside the cottage with Prince Bagration and Weyrother. Weyrother was an Austrian general who had replaced the slain Schmidt. In the entryway, little Kozlovsky was crouching in front of a scribe. The scribe, the cuffs of his tunic turned up, was writing hurriedly on an overturned tub. Kozlovsky's face looked exhausted. Obviously, he had not slept that night. He glanced at Prince Andrei and did not even nod to him. Second line, have you written that? He went on, dictating to the scribe. The Kievsky Grenadiers, the Podolsky. Don't rush, Your Honor, the scribe replied disrespectfully and crossfully, looking at Kozlovsky. From behind the door just then came the animated and displeased voice of Kutuzov, interrupted by another unknown voice. From the sound of that voice, from the inattention with which Kozlovsky glanced at him, from the disrespectfulness of the exhausted scribe, from the fact that the scribe and Kozlovsky were sitting so close to the commander-in-chief on the floor by the tub, and from the fact that the Cossacks who tended the horses were laughing loudly outside the window. From all that, Prince Andrei could feel that something grave and unfortunate must be happening. Prince Andrei plied Kozlovsky with insistent questions. One moment, Prince, said Kozlovsky, a disposition for Bagration. And capitulation? Nothing of the sort. Order has been issued for battle. Prince Andrei went to the door, behind which voices could be heard. But just as he was about to open the door, the voices in the room fell silent. The door opened by itself, and Kutuzov, with his eagle's beak on his plump face, appeared in the doorway. Prince Andrei was standing directly in front of Kutuzov, but from the expression in the commander-in-chief's one good eye, it was clear that his thoughts and concerns occupied him so greatly that it was as if they interfered with his vision. He looked directly at his adjutant's face and did not recognize him. Well, what, are you finished? He addressed Kozlovsky. This second, Your Excellency. Bagration, of medium height, with a firm and immobile face of the Oriental type, dry, not yet an old man, came out from the commander after the commander-in-chief. I have the honor of reporting to you, Prince Andrei repeated, quite loudly, handing him an envelope. Ah, from Vienna? Very well. Later. Kutuzov and Bagration stepped out to the porch. Well, goodbye, Prince, he said to Bagration. Christ be with you. I bless you for a great deed. Kutuzov's face suddenly softened, and tears welled up in his eyes. He pulled Bagration to him with his left hand, and with his right, which had a ring on it, making an obviously habitual gesture, crossed himself and offered him his plump cheek, instead of which Bagration kissed him on the neck. Christ be with you, Kutuzov repeated, and went to his carriage. Get in with me, he said to Volokhonsky. Your Excellency, I should like to be of use here. Allow me to stay in Prince Bagration's detachment. Get in, said Kutuzov, noticing that Volokhonsky hung back, said, I need good officers myself. They got into the carriage and rode for several minutes in silence. There is still much before us, much of everything, he said, with an old man's perceptive expression, as though he understood everything that was going on in Volokhonsky's soul. If 1/10 of his detachment comes back tomorrow, I'll thank God, Kutuzov added, as if speaking to himself. Prince Andrei looked at Kutuzov, and his eyes were involuntarily struck by the carefully washed creases of the scar on Kutuzov's temple, a foot away from him, where the Ismail bullet had pierced his head and put out his eye. Yes, he has the right to speak so calmly about the deaths of these people, thought Volokhonsky. That is why I'm asking you to send me to that detachment, he said. Kutuzov did not reply. He seemed to have forgotten what he said, and sat in deep thought. After 5 minutes, rocking smoothly on the soft springs of the carriage, Kutuzov turned to Prince Andrei. There was no trace of emotion on his face. With fine irony, he questioned the prince about the details of his meeting with the emperor, about the opinions he had heard at court concerning the actions at Krems, and about several women of their mutual acquaintance. Section 14. All right. On the first day of November, Kutuzov received information through one of his scouts that placed the army he commanded in an almost hopeless position. The scout had reported that the French, in enormous force, having crossed the bridge in Vienna, were heading towards Kutuzov's line of communications with the troops coming from Russia. If Kutuzov decided to stay in Krems, the 150,000-man army of Napoleon would cut him off from all communications, surround his exhausted 40,000-man army, and he would find himself in the position of Mack at Ulm. If Kutuzov decided to abandon the road leading to communications with the troops from Russia, he would have to enter with no road into the unknown territory of the Bohemian Mountains, defending himself from the superior numbers of the enemy and abandoning any hope of communications with Buxhausen. If Kutuzov decided to retreat down the road of Krems to Olmütz to unite with the troops from Russia, he would risk being forestalled on the road by the French who had crossed the bridge at Vienna, and thus being forced to accept battle on the march with all his heavy baggage and transport, and to deal with an enemy that outnumbered him 3-1 and surrounded him on both sides. Kutuzov chose this last course. The French, as the scout reported, had crossed the bridge in Vienna, and by forced marches were making for Znaim, which lay on the path of Kutuzov's retreat, more than 60 miles ahead of him. To reach Znaim before the French meant to gain great hope of saving the army. To let the French forestall them in Znaim meant certainly to subject the whole army to a disgrace similar to that at Ulm, or to total destruction. To forestall the French with his entire army was impossible. The road from Vienna to Znaim was shorter and better than the Russians' road from Krems to Znaim. The night he received this information, Kutuzov sent Bagration's 4,000-man vanguard to the right over the hills from the Krems-Znaim to the Vienna-Znaim road. Bagration was to make this march without resting, to stop with his face to Vienna and his back to Znaim, if he managed to forestall the French, to detain them there as long as he could. Kutuzov himself started out for Znaim with all the heavy baggage. Having gone 30 miles across the hills with hungry, ill-shod soldiers, with no road on a stormy night, losing a third of his men as stragglers, Bagration came out at Hollabrunn on the Vienna-Znaim road, several hours ahead of the French, who were approaching Hollabrunn from Vienna. Kutuzov still needed to go a whole 24 hours with his baggage train to reach Znaim, and therefore to save the army, Bagration, and 4,000 hungry, exhausted soldiers. Kutuzov still needed to go a whole 24 hours with his baggage train to reach Znaim, and therefore to save the army, Bagration, with 4,000 hungry, exhausted soldiers, had to hold off for 24 hours the entire army coming to meet him at Hollabrunn, which was obviously impossible. But a freak of fate made the impossible possible. The success of the trick which gave the Vienna bridge into the hands of the French without a fight prompted Murat to try to trick Kutuzov the same way. Murat, meeting Bagration's weak detachment on the Znaim road, thought it was the whole of Kutuzov's army. In order to crush this army indubitably, he awaited the troops that lagged behind on the road from Vienna, and with that aim suggested a 3-day truce, on condition that neither army change its position or stir from its place. Murat assured them that peace negotiations were already underway, and therefore, to avoid useless bloodshed, he was suggesting a truce. The Austrian general, Count Nostitz, who occupied the advanced post, believed the words of Murat's envoy and fell back, exposing Bagration's detachment. Another envoy rode to the Russian line to announce the same news of peace negotiations and offer the Russian army a 3-day truce. Bagration replied that he could neither accept nor reject a truce, and sent his adjutant to Kutuzov with a report of the offer made to him. For Kutuzov, the truce was the sole meaning of gaining time, giving Bagration's exhausted detachment some rest, and allowing the train and heavy baggage, whose movements was concealed from the French, to make at least one extra march towards Znaim. The offer of a truce gave the soul an unexpected possibility of saving the army. On receiving this news, Kutuzov immediately sent the Adjutant General Winzingerode, who was attached to him, to the enemy camp. Winzingerode was not only to accept the truce, but also to offer conditions for capitulation. And meanwhile, Kutuzov sent his adjutants back to speed up as much as possible the movements of the whole army's baggage trains along the Krems-Znaim road. Bagration's exhausted, hungry detachment covering this movement of the baggage train, and the whole army had alone to remain unmoving before an enemy 8 times its strength. Kutuzov's expectations came true both with regard to the fact that the offer of capitulation, without committing them to anything, might gain time for some portion of the baggage train to pass, and with regard to the fact that Murat's mistake was bound to be discovered very quickly. As soon as Bonaparte, who was in Schönbrunn, some 15 miles from Hollabrunn, received Murat's communication with the project of a truce and capitulation, he saw through the deception and wrote the following letter to Murat. All right. In English, it would be, to Prince Murat, Schönbrunn, 25, Brumaire, or the 15th of November, 1805. So there we go. There's our answer. This is 1805. The end of 1805. 15th of November, 1805, at 8 o'clock a.m. It is impossible for me to find words to express to you my displeasure. You command only my vanguard, and you do not have the right to make an armistice without my order. You are making me lose the fruits of a campaign. Break the armistice on the spot and march to the enemy. Declare to him, the general who signed this capitulation did not have the right to make it, that only the Emperor of Russia has that right. Any time, however, that the Emperor of Russia will ratify the said convention, I will ratify it. But it is only a trick. March, destroy the Russian army. You are in a position to take their baggage and artillery. The adjutant of the Emperor of Russia is a officers are nothing, that they have no power. This one has none. The Austrians let themselves be fooled in the crossing of the bridge of Vienna, and you are letting yourself be fooled by one of the Emperor's adjutants, Napoleon. Signed, Napoleon. Bonaparte's adjutant galloped off at full speed with this threatening letter to Murat. Bonaparte himself, not trusting his generals, moved with all his guards to the field of battle, fearing to let the ready victim slip, while Bagration's 4,000-man division cheerfully lit campfires, dried out, warmed up, cooked kasha for the first time in 3 days, and not one man in the division knew or thought about what lay ahead of him. And that is the end of 14. So we will leave it there for the day. And we will pick up there on Monday. So thank you guys again. Rather interesting, as we're definitely in the war section. And yeah, the question earlier was about when this period actually is. And it seems the novel spans the period of 1805 to 1820, which, as we've discovered, this battle right here is in November of 1805. So like I said, still kind of early in Napoleon's, in the Napoleonic Wars, which kind of makes sense because he's only, at the beginning we saw he was just kind of now becoming a bit of celebrity status, like foreign celebrity status in the Russian court, and gossip about his actions. And since, which would make sense if he's just now kind of, the Napoleonic Wars are just now becoming kind of commonplace, and the Russians wouldn't have been involved maybe the first couple of years, but now are slowly getting involved. And Prince Andrei is clearly trying to be the most use of possible, and also like find his stride in being a man of war and strategy. So yeah. Well, thank you guys very much. That one was a little bit tricky, and some of the names are funny. Like that last guy, his name is like quite the tongue twister. Winsinger Road, like tricky. All right, but thank you guys so much. I hope you have a great rest of your Friday and a lovely weekend, and catch up with you all on Monday with more of this. And feel free to leave any comments or questions on the video. Check out the playlist for anything you may have missed. And yeah, have a great rest of your day. Stay safe and healthy out there. Thanks.